Greetings from the dark side. Paranormal M welcomes you to a world where reality meets the inexplicable. Don't miss out on a hair-raising tale. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay informed. Happy haunting. Ask Reddit 1. While I've had several experiences that I would chalk up as particularly questionable in terms of paranormal stuff, the earliest I can remember was from when I was a little kid, maybe 7 or 8. My dad and I were driving back from his friend's house. My ma and brothers had gone home earlier in her car. It was around midnight, late as fuck for a kid to be awake. But Dad wanted to stay late and talk tech with his nerd friends. I was very adamant about going home with my dad because of his car. I loved riding in the back seat of his Saab. All that soft, comfy leather all to myself. No brothers to fight for space, so I was amped sitting in the back middle seat like I was controlling a spaceship, just flying down this dark stretch of forest road in Maryland. My understanding of speed wasn't very keen, but from memory I think we were probably doing around 50 maybe. Out of nowhere, and I mean like poof, nowhere, this bright white deer pops into view. First time, as far as I can remember, I heard my dad say fuck. There was no time to brake. My dad floored it, which I later learned is what you're supposed to do because science. Instead of launching the deer and us crashing in a fiery wreck, we went through it. It was like slow motion. We went through it and it passed through the car. I watched it pass through the hood, dashboard, then through me. It felt weird, too. Like warm and cold at the same time. Kind of weird. So we passed through it, and my dad pulls over. After making sure I'm alright and making sure we both saw what we saw, he gets out and runs back with his flashlight. There isn't any sign of it ever being there. No blood, no deer bits. Not even a scratch on the spaceship. But we did both see it. We talked about it the whole drive home. We never came to any real conclusion as to what that was, really. Ask Reddit 2. Finally, I've been waiting for one of these for forever. My family has roots in witchcraft. My great-grandmother was a witch in deep Mexico. I don't know what kind, but my grandmother refuses to talk about it. We know she had a very interesting life, from owning monkeys and owls to my great-grandfather being a shark and whale hunter. Mind you, this is before commercial hunting started wiping out the population. I digress. She was very, very particular in the time I knew her. She refused to step in churches, pray, or even look at crosses. My grandmother and mother say it's because of her witchcraft. When my great-grandmother was dying at age 99, my grandmother tended to her for almost a year, doing nothing but waiting on her 24/7 at home, during which time my great-grandmother suffered horribly from burning fevers of over 107. She also had horrific black sores, and the feeling of internal fire, as she described it. My mother says God was punishing her for her sins on earth. Fast forward, my great-grandmother passes one night. When my grandmother finds her, she finds a crow in the room standing on her mother's bed. Mind you, this is in Mexico. The windows are kept shut and barred. Doors locked and bolted due to crime. The crow looked at her and cawed, then flew out the doorway over my grandmother's head. My grandmother flipped, throwing holy water around the whole house and drawing salt lines at doorways. At my great-grandmother's funeral, her casket was placed in a mausoleum, with the grave in the center 8 feet deep, base layer of fresh concrete, and the casket was lowered onto it. Then another 5 feet of fresh cement were laid on top of the casket, sealing her forever. I assume it's to prevent whatever evil spirit she may produce to ever leave. and perhaps commit what she had done again. I have plenty of stories such as this from my life if anybody interested, but I'll reply to my comment later with them. Ask Reddit 3. When I was around 12 or 13, we lived on a horse farm. It was in this big house on top of a hill in Cherokee County, Georgia. Highest hill in the area. Great view, too, but I always felt uneasy in the house, like there was a weird vibe or something. Walking down the halls at night or going to the basement, even in my own room, there was always this unsettling feeling. One evening, my parents and I were getting ready to go out for Mexican food. We were almost to the car when my mother realized she forgot the TV was on in the master bedroom on the top floor. House is 2 stories, with a large basement and a garage coming out of the side of the hill as well. They sent the young one with the fresh legs to run up to the 2 flights of stairs to turn it off while they waited in the car. The moment I turned off the TV, this loud, evil-sounding laughter broke out and echoed through the whole house. It was a male voice, seemingly coming from everywhere and nowhere. It's like the walls were resonating with this evil laugh. All the hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up while chills and tingles shot up and down my spine. I ran out of the room and down the stairs so fast I must have only touched 2 steps on the way down, shot out of the bottom door like a damn bullet. My parents asked me what the hell was wrong, as I had gone white as a sheet and I had come flying out of the door practically on the tips of my toes. I was running so fast. They, of course, didn't believe me at first. However, a few years later, my mother admitted that she, too, always felt uneasy in the house. After speaking with the previous owners and the builders of the house, the original owner was a contractor and built the house himself, we found out that they had experienced some strange and spooky things too, like a male voice screaming from the basement, and large sturdy shelves suddenly and violently crashing down off the wall of the basement. We're not sure what the full story is on that hill or why there seemed to be so much negative energy permeating that house, but I used to walk around the surrounding woods a whole lot, and more than once did I come across burial mounds in the woods. So, it's possible that being the highest hill in the immediate area, perhaps some prominent Cherokee was buried there at some point, and perhaps the home had disturbed that. I'll likely never know, but I'll never forget that house. Still creeps me out over 20 years later. Ask Reddit 4. Used to live in a haunted house, a farmhouse. No joke. I've had a couple of experiences, but I'm going to tell 2 of them because they're short. The first one was when I woke up, went down the stairs, got some breakfast, went up to our sunroom. It overlooked a small garden. There was this man I'd never seen before that was digging some holes and putting flowers into the garden. Nothing odd. I waved at him, he waved at me, and I continued on eating. I had finished my food when I walked into our kitchen. Mind you, it's a straight line from the sunroom. I walked up, walked my bowl in the sink, came back probably a total of 15 seconds. That's when I came back to the guy, gone, like he was never even there. I asked my grandmother and parents about the man, but they have no idea what I'm talking about. They said there was no guy. That one was probably not so bad though. So it was a short one, but my most recent was when I was asleep. I felt this figure watching me. Thought it might have been my parents. I thought I'd be thought it would be funny to scare them, so I decided that I would jump up and grab them. I waited for the right moment and grabbed, but when I looked up, there was nothing there. My hand started to tingle with pins and needles and it traveled down my arm to my shoulder. Then an outline of a boy appeared. He looked young, around 5 feet. He had no distinct details and was completely see-through. He had this light glow and just sat there. Finally, I let go of the pins and needles in my arm, and it dispersed immediately, and his outline just vanished. That was the first time I've had contact with a ghost. I've always caught a glimpse of them, like seeing them in mirrors or seeing a figure out of the corner of my eye, then turning and not being there. My sister and mother have the same things to different degrees, though. It's not uncommon, but that one was something that none of us had done before. Oh yeah, and my sister has this ghost lady that watched over her that appears every so often. Changes the lights in the room that she's in. I'll have small conversations with her that's been going on since she was a baby. She hates me. Well, those are some of mine. Believe them if you want. Is believing in ghosts just wishful thinking? There's a famous quote that goes, "In the beginning, man created God." And I get it. The darkness is scary. I mean them, not me. I feel alive after the sun goes down. I rather like the darkness. But the darkness I'm actually referring to is death, not just the absence of light. The idea that we're all alone, that this is it, is truly frightening. Religion tries to make sense of that and create order from chaos. It comforts people believing if they follow the rules, there's an afterlife waiting for them. And if they don't follow the rules, even those described as unpleasant, there's still an afterlife waiting for them. Bring sunscreen. I've had experiences in my life that led me to believe that there is something else. I can't say scientifically they were ghosts, but I can't say it wasn't either. But the logical part of my brain says it wasn't. There has to be another explanation. When my grandfather died, my father's pocket watch stopped at the exact time of his death. Can't really explain that. My maternal grandmother once went to a seance where details about a neighbor's death from years prior were revealed. And it was just so out of context at the time it freaked her out a little bit. The problem for me is, like with religion, all we really have is faith that it exists. It can't really be quantified or qualified. There are no peer-reviewed studies offering proof. I like to think that since time appears to be circular, with the past, present, and future existing at the same time in space-time, that even if you do die, you still have immortality somewhere else in the timeline. I've even wondered if it's possible that when you die, your consciousness just goes back to a previous point on your timeline, like a replay for eternity. Or maybe you jump to a different version of our universe, and that's why we've done things like deja vu. But I'm more on the skeptical side of things now. I used to love books by people like Hans Holzer. I met Lorraine Warren years ago, and I was into all of it. But now I want to go spend the night at Amityville House, or room 1408 if they have one anywhere, or room 217, or anywhere else that has some kind of reputation, just to see, or visit Dudleytown. It's in my state after all. And the reason being, even if something bad happens, it's proof of something supernatural, right? There's another option nobody considered. What if ghosts are real but have nothing to do with us? What if they're another form of life existing at the same time in the same place as us, but maybe on a different dimension? The old farmhouse. So yesterday I was on my way back home with the truck parts that I'd picked up and did what I do a lot of times. Opened up my map on my iPhone, started checking the countryside roads for any cemeteries I wasn't aware of. I go to them and I walk through and record audio and video for my own record. I located one on a narrow side road. I went to the area, and when I got there, I discovered that it was private property. It would be a 10-minute walk through the field to get to it. And not wanting to upset the property owner or get in trouble for trespassing, went to a house that was next door by a long gravel lane. As I got closer to the house, it was obvious that it was no longer lived in. It was a huge 2-story farmhouse, and in its day, it was probably quite beautiful, I'm sure. I decided, though, to go ahead and knock on the door. I've seen people live in worse conditions and wanted to at least make an effort to knock on the door. Not gonna lie, though, this place was unkept and had a pretty creepy appearance, tattered curtains and all. A few windows had also been broken into. I opened the screen door and knocked on the door. It swung open, and that's when I knocked, and it exposed that the house appeared to have been quickly moved out some years ago, full of furniture, clothing laying on the floor. The kitchen was visible down the hall from the front door, and you could see the table was still there. I decided to step into the threshold of the doorway and started recording with my iPhone. I yelled out, "Hello?" several times, knowing that there was no one living there. Within about 45 seconds of stepping in, I was full-on hit with the front of my body with an air so cold that I was like stepping outside in the winter night. It was very cold air. Now, the outside temperature was about 60 degrees. It had been warm for several days. The house was not cold when I stepped in, but this cold air that hit me started to slowly move up my lower legs. Now, as this took place, my lower left leg just above the ankle began to feel as if I was being eaten up by fire ants. But there were no fire ants. I asked out loud, "If you're doing that to me, please stop, because it hurts." And after asking me several times and explaining that I was not there to do anything to the house or property within it, the burning stopped. But that very cold air remained. I made my intentions very clear, never moved further into the house. I asked the usual questions, panned to my left and to my right, capturing each room off to my sides and the staircase that was directly in front of me. Just as I stated that I was going to leave and would be maybe coming back someday, I observed with the naked eye a misty apparition cross in front of me from left to right. It was also captured on my iPhone. I was by myself. I wasn't smoking. There's no fog or mist outside or somehow coming into the house. The house sits about 900 feet from the roadway, and the door doesn't face the road, so it was not a reflection from a car, and there's no other houses close by. The feeling that accompanied this dark and ominous and definitely didn't feel friendly or welcoming. I've been to many cemeteries and other places over the years, but I've never witnessed anything like this. I am somewhat skeptical when nobody's trying. Well, I always try to debunk it, anything that I can. And this one has me speechless. I'll definitely be locating the owner and attempting to get permission for an investigation. My father's home, where this all started. This past week has been one for which I would prefer to forget. Christmas was the worst one for me ever in my life, and I'll never be forgotten. I grew up without having a close relationship with my father, and I didn't get to see a lot of him because of his job. At age 10, he and my mother divorced, and further damage was done to the relationship. It was rocky between us until I turned 16 and got my license. I started to see more of him, and we began to get closer. By age 18 or 19, we were taking off to go on hunting trips and fishing, and I discovered that Mom had not always been truthful about my dad. Now, several years prior to the divorce, they bought an old farmhouse, and at a very good price. My father remodeled the whole house over the years, and it was nice. But there was always this feeling that something was not quite right. I would get the creeps as a child, and I'd never stepped foot in the cellar. It scared the hell out of me. Some years later, though, I discovered why they got it at such a good price. The elderly couple that sold it had lost their son. He had been sent to Vietnam, and after returning home, he was like a lot of vets from the war era. Apparently, things became too much for the poor guy, and he went to the cellar and shot himself with a rifle. About 2 years ago, me and my dad had sort of a falling out and hadn't spoken during this time. This was stupidity on both of our parts. I've been trying to get up the nerve to stop and knock on the door, but part of his trouble was at his age he was having some mental issues. Didn't always remember who people were and had a history of meeting people at the door with a gun. So I'd been putting it off. On December 22nd, 2022, I decided to man up and go knock on the door to put an end to the madness. Now, he had remarried in 1989 and had a daughter, my half-sister, and this plays a major role in this situation. But there was no closeness between I and them, although I'd always liked my stepmom and thought she was a good person. As I drove back the lane to the house, something felt way off. It was heavy and oppressively dark. Thought it was just my nerves. When the house came into full view, I had a bad feeling. There were no cars there. Everybody looked pretty much abandoned. When I went up to the door, there was no noise or response, and when I knocked on the door, I felt as if somebody was watching me. Walked around to the kitchen patio door, and when I looked inside, my stomach fell out of me. It was empty and the interior was gutted. I was able to get in the house and I was taking video with my iPhone to document the conditions. It was at this point that I knew my father was gone, and by gone I mean he had passed away. I could hear a voice telling me, "He's gone, you're too late." And admittedly, I was feeling totally devastated and out of it. I went through the entire house until I reached the cellar steps. Under any other circumstances, I would have never went into that cellar, especially when I was there alone and absolutely nobody I knew was there. But I felt like something was pulling at me to walk down those steps into the darkness. There was no power on in the house, and I had no flashlight with me, just the one on my phone. So I started down the steps, not feeling any fear at the moment, not until I reached the cellar and turned to my left. I was then hit so hard it felt as if I had to gasp for air just to get anything into my lungs. The level of fear went from 0 to 10 instantly. On my phone screen, I could see several bright orbs coming at me. They stopped directly in front of me for several seconds, then turned and went back the way they came from. But after that, it was solid orbs and anomalies swarming all around me. Now, there were no windows or doors, no fans, and it was colder in there than it was outside, which was about 30 degrees. It had been way cold for weeks. I could hear whispers, and at one point talking that was loud enough I thought somebody had walked into the house. I confronted what I'd suspected was in that cellar for all these years, and I was met with very loud slams and bangs. Upon going back upstairs, the slams and banging continued. I told it that it wasn't afraid, or I wasn't, and that I'd be back. After going back outside, a vehicle pulled in. Come to find out, it was the new owner. He had just taken possession of the house December 8th from my stepmom. Come to find out, though, that this kind of stranger, my dad, had passed away several months ago. He died of an evil that needs to be abolished. Cancer. My stepmom had told nobody. My aunts didn't even know that he had passed away. Nobody in the family knew. She placed the house for sale after selling his '57 Ford and gun collection and apparently everything else. My half-sister were gone into the wind, and listing the realtor said that the seller refused to have a sale sign placed on the property. I believe that's, what's in the house that harassed my father for years and influenced many things and may have influenced her actions as well. Since I was at the house, things have begun to occur in my home, more than usual, so I'm documenting everything. 3 years ago, I was told by 2 different psychics that I had an attachment, and then I had picked it up from a child at home, and that they felt it had influenced or attempted to influence somebody to take their own life. They were obviously 100% correct. Sleep paralysis story. 23-year-old male. Hey everybody. Today I decided to share my story and experience with sleep paralysis I had some years ago. 2017 or 18, not sure exactly. So basically it had started way before this, when I was around 8 or 9. The first time I had sleep paralysis, it was an apartment I was living in where I had fallen asleep during the day after school to rest. It was a bunk bed because I could see weird stories about these, and anyways, I suddenly opened my eyes and in front of me, I see clearly a woman dressed as a nurse holding a goddamn syringe. She was looking straight in the eyes and she sprayed the syringe around a bit, and then I woke up. Almost terrified to death, but yeah. Anyways, a while after that I kept having random scary dreams, but not any paralysis. However, back in 2017 or 18, not sure of the year exactly, I started experiencing sleep paralysis again. It started with somebody breathing close to my face and then somebody hovering above me during the night. Then I kept seeing small kids entering my apartment and all the weirdest shit you can imagine. And let me emphasize that this kind of been going on for 20 days to a month. Basically, whenever I'm going to fall asleep, I knew I'd have sleep paralysis. I was kind of prepared for it. One night I remember I had it, and then I woke up and I was so tired that I fell asleep and then had it again, twice in a goddamn night. Anyways, I was looking around trying to find a way to get rid of it. It was tiring and exhausting me, and then I came upon a video of this Islamic preacher. I'm a Muslim, by the way, however, all the prayers to that point before sleeping somehow didn't help me. And this guy simply said this: whenever you experience, tripped over myself. Whenever you experience sleep paralysis, usually it wakes you up around 2 or 3 o'clock. Simply wake up, clean yourself, we call it wudu, and wait for the morning prayer and just pray. Background story why the prayer. We Muslims believe jinns attack us at night and cause sleep paralysis. They do not like prayer and whatever's related to it. So basically, the day I heard this, I went to sleep and of course, once again as expected, the lovely jinn woke me up. Got up, did wudu, and waited for like an hour or two for the morning prayer. Funny thing was, I went into the bathroom and a damn shower head fell down by itself without me touching it, and it broke. Believe me or not, I know it sounds damn weird. Anyways, I prayed and fell asleep. It's been a couple of years now. No sleep paralysis until now. Had some weird dreams, but they're nothing compared to sleep paralysis. Those who experience or experienced sleep paralysis know. I wanted to share this because I've only told my family members about this, and I'm not sure really if all of them believe me. But hey, let this be here. Maybe some of you have sleep paralysis stories as well. This is a true story. Before incident, our family consists of me, my mom, and my stepfather. We moved to a different state from Hyderabad to Vijayawada. Whoa. Vijayawada. Hyderabad to Vijayawada. We're going with that. They're both located in India. I was 11 years old at the time and we were doing pretty good financially, but I had to move back to Hyderabad back again. During or time of moving back, our parents were arranging transport. I was sent to my grandma's house so I wouldn't get in their way. During the process of transporting, arranging everything into a truck, my mom noticed weird noises coming from her house. So she went upstairs to check. While she was looking, she noticed a bright white light figure sitting in a chair on our balcony. So she took out a phone and started recording it. There is a recording of this, but I currently don't have it. We'll post it here as I managed to find it. The ghostly figure immediately disappeared. She told about this incident to my father, who immediately denied it, saying it's just her imagination. My mom then showed the video she recorded, and then he couldn't believe his eyes, but he was still a bit skeptical as he doesn't believe in ghosts. They came to Hyderabad and moved into a really nice penthouse. Lived there happily for 3 years. Incident. We had to move house again due to being financially unstable. My father found out about a villa that was available for rent. And up to that point, I've never lived in a villa, so I was pretty excited about it. We went to check the house, and it was pretty decent to look at for the most part, except for the paints. We decided to move in anyway. Things were pretty okay for the first 2 weeks, and one day my mom's watering the plants in our backyard. Our neighbor noticed my mom and started pretty casual conversation, you would say. And during it, our neighborhood asks my mom, our neighbor, "It's everything all right in the house?" To which my mom replied, "Yeah, actually, we love this house." Then her neighbor lady asks my mom if there's any weird activities going on in her house. My mom, which she was a bit surprised, asks why. Then the lady says that she notices weird noises coming from out of the room that's faced towards her house. She says that our backyard light just randomly flickering and turning on and off despite being empty for over a year. The lady says the reason previous tenants relocated the house was due to some paranormal activity that happened in our house. My mom was surprised to learn this, but she didn't discuss about this with me nor my dad. A few days later, I started hearing footsteps in our attic. Objects randomly falling off the top shelf for no reason, and I remember one time our dog just randomly barking at empty stairs. She got so spooked that her hair stood up. A few days later, one evening, I was chilling in my room, going through social media, and then suddenly, my room door suddenly shut so loud and fast that I got a mini heart attack. At first, I thought it was my mom being a regular old angry Asian woman that was mad at me for not studying. So I opened the door and went to check in her room. She wasn't inside. I searched the entire house, but she wasn't at home at all. I knew the only other place at that time that she could be. Went outside to find my mom where I've seen her feeding street dogs at the end of our street. So I go up to her and ask why she was mad. Then she said, "Why? Why would I be angry at you for no reason?" Then I asked why she slammed the door so hard, which she replied she wasn't at home for an hour. Then I heard that I was terrified. Then I explained what happened, to which she replied saying it's just wind. Couldn't convince her. I didn't want it to go back into my house. Things from here got really chaotic. A few days later, our sinks in the bathroom just randomly collapsed. The very next day, our backyard window was broken into tiny pieces despite no wind at all that day. I started noticing weird sounds of crying woman coming out of our upper hall. Plates in our kitchen would randomly fall from a shelf and make huge noise. Started to notice that there was like a million cockroaches in our house. They were all over the house. Sometimes the house would smell like dead dogs. Ew. From here, my dad started noticing that things are not well in our house. Really? He started noticing the paranormal activities that are going on. One day, he reported saying that he saw a shadowy figure. A shadowy figure in our dining room. One day, my mom returned home from her job. That day, I noticed huge screams downstairs. So I explained to my mom what I'm experiencing every day and what I heard that day. But she was pretty tired that day, and she denied, saying it's just in my head. While I'm trying to convince her, we heard a huge glass break noise upstairs. As soon as we heard that, there was a power outage only in our house. Me and my mom ran outside to find that the power outage only happened in our home. The glass break sound was so loud that it was like the glass broke on top of our heads. My mom was really scared and my dog was shivering. Then I made up my mind to check inside. My mom was begging for me not to check, but I went in anyway, as it had already been 30 minutes. I searched for the torchlight and found it lying around in the cabinet, and I made my way upstairs to check if any of our windows or mirrors were broken. There was nothing. I couldn't find anything. I went downstairs to check on my mom and report to her that I found nothing, and my mom was terrified. We waited outside for our father. We came home from his job, and we explained everything on what happened, and he immediately sent me and my mom to our grandma's house, and, well, after a few days, both parents started their search for a new house. After a few days, we shifted into a place, and to this day, the paranormal activities didn't stop. But they're not as bad as what happened in our previous house. A few days after we relocated to the new place, our dog had passed away. There's still some paranormal activities happening to us, such as randomly hearing our names being called or kitchen utensils randomly falling down in front of our eyes. Strange energy here. Starting to fear staying in this new apartment for any longer. Ever since I moved, everything's been going good and fine. Especially because we left this other apartment which was filled with terrible and dark demonic energy. Now I'm starting to think that it's back, and its energy found its way back to us. It's sad because it feels very much real and is generally hard to avoid and get rid of. I've been trying to avoid a few people I've known from the past from coming over, but I couldn't, since they're not my people, nor do I have any say in this. These are my mother's friends, and I've been warning her and reminding her about how badly affected we'll be again, based on past events and experiences. Lately and recently, I've been seeing black shadows. They're constantly moving around at random. Been seeing doors in the house randomly opening and closing, and this has nothing to do with the wind. I've been constantly looking around as if there's someone in the house or someone near me, even though I'm completely alone. Just me and my mother living here. Found a few things that I had immediately thrown away. A tooth while I was cleaning. And no, this doesn't belong to anybody in the household. Especially with its shape and size. Nobody else knows or has a missing tooth either, I checked. Besides that, this tooth was never there to begin with ever since I moved in. Since I've always been cleaning and rearranging furniture anyway. More and more cats appearing in front of me in my doorway. They're not even scared, they just sit there and watch me with no reaction. Freaks me out. Strangers appearing in front of the doorway in the apartment, constantly staring and running away, hiding whenever they catch me finding them. Plates, cups, and other random items falling apart and breaking at random times even without them having slipped, which again, I find very strange. The other day, a ceramic player broke without it being moved or touched. A huge crack, and that's it. It's worse when things just start falling all over the house anyhow. Even with the pipes in the sewer department, the explosion of water and so on. It scares me too at how aggressive it gets. Hearing an otherworldly scream after using a Ouija board. This happened to me and my siblings when we were very young, but the memory is very vivid. This was the most intense paranormal experience I've had in my life, and just wanted to get it out there. To start, the house we lived in at the time was definitely haunted. My sister told me much later on that she would hear someone walking up the stairs, and then a shadowy figure would stand in her doorway. I heard the steps back then, but I'd always assumed it was just her walking around. She didn't tell me too much later, as she didn't want to scare me. The house was very creepy at night. I always felt a profound sense of being watched whenever I'd go past certain spots. It was completely different when I would go back home to my mom's house. I wasn't afraid of the dark, and I would still get up at night to go to the bathroom. But it always felt very scary to do so, and I would hurry as fast as possible. On to the actual story. I was 10, big sister 13, and little brother 8. I begged my older sister to let us play with a little Ouija board keychain toy that she had. I was fascinated by ghosts and the supernatural. I wasn't scared of ghosts at all, and in fact, I loved them a lot and I only thought they were kind of interesting. It took a lot of convincing, but eventually she agreed to play with the board. We all sat down at the kitchen table and my sister and I put our fingers on the planchette and asked if anybody was there, to which it almost immediately said yes. We spent some time arguing that the other was definitely moving and, well, just asking some benign questions. I don't remember. After a bit, we started getting scared, so we said, let's stop. The planchette immediately and harshly moved to no, and we instantly pulled our hands back. As soon as we did, we all hear this horrible screeching or scream, one that did not sound human at all. We each described it a bit differently, but we all heard it all at once. We ran so fast to the other room that we all sat huddled on the couch for a long time. Finally, I asked if anybody else heard that, to which they all nodded. We stayed that way for hours, till my dad came home. He didn't tell me about it, and nothing really came of it. Or rather, we didn't tell him. But it was so terrifying that to this day recalling it gives me the chills. Something was in the woods tonight. I'm not sure what it was. I feel creeped out even typing this. I'm staying at my friend's house in Tennessee over winter break, and tonight I helped her feed the neighbor's dogs because they're out of town. Her house is in a somewhat rural area. There's clusters of homes kind of spread across fields, forest, and lake areas. All very beautiful and lots of wildlife. Anyways, it's about 9 p.m. and it's way past sunset. It's quite dark. We're walking the short distance from the neighbor's house back to hers. We're on a road, but directly next to us is a small woods sloping into a lake. I'm a little bit nervous about it, so I make a joke like, that forest is kind of creeping me out. Imagine if there was a skinwalker in there. My friend said it's bad luck to type it out or say it aloud. I don't know if, well, till after this event, and I'm not taking chances. She laughs and gobbles like a turkey loudly into the forest. I jokingly said something like, don't do that, it'll attract one. And not even 5 seconds later, we hear an identical gobble back to us from the forest. It was definitely not an echo, and there's no light in there, no paths, and it was very cold, like 30 degrees. Can't imagine anybody would be there. I just remember saying, oh my God, and then sprinting as fast as I could back to the house. I don't think I've ever ran so fast or so meaningfully. I didn't turn back, and I was so out of breath. My friend thought the whole thing was funny, but it was so freaky. Why does anybody know what this was? Or rather, I think they mean, does anybody know what this was? Maybe it was just a turkey or somebody trying to be funny. Brand new house, inexplicable things started happening. We built our house brand new about 3.5 years ago. We are the original owners and there haven't been any deaths within the house, human or animal. Most of the things that have happened we either chose to completely ignore or explain. Recently, things have been escalating to where we can't really explain and are wondering what could possibly cause this. About a year into living here, we would hear knocking on our bedroom or closet windows. Our cameras didn't catch anything, but we said it's probably the wind or bushes. Then hats started falling off of the hangers on the wall. We attributed that to it probably being them becoming loose on the hangers or maybe even the air conditioning, but we couldn't prove either. We recently had a baby instead of a monitor that has audio and visual capabilities along with recording and playback. Occurrence 1. While the baby and we were sleeping, we woke up to a loud knocking through a monitor. To shave and a haircut. What? We called the cops and our neighbors who have cameras pointed that way. They said they heard it too. Their dogs started barking and we caught nothing on cameras. All we have is a sound recording of it as well. The cops searched the entire area and didn't find a thing. We just tried to tell ourselves it was some kids in the neighborhood that somehow didn't set off any cameras. Occurrence 2. While the baby was sleeping in her crib around 11:30 p.m., I was sleeping in my bed and my husband was watching a movie on the couch and he heard the bedroom door to our daughter's room open. He heard the handle, the squeak of the door opening, the squeak of the door closing, and then the click of the door lock. He woke me up, we searched the whole house, we couldn't find anything. All we have is a loud recording from her baby monitor. Most recent. Yesterday, around 11 p.m., 11:30, we again heard somebody knocking on the window to shave and a haircut. What? At this point, we set up enough cameras that we wouldn't have any blind spots. We couldn't catch anything. What could possibly explain this as a new house? We don't dabble with Ouija boards or anything of the sort. We just want to know where we can begin to research and begin to explain this. Shave and a haircut. Something saying shave and a haircut, or you're hearing someone shaving and cutting their hair. All of that's crazy. Doppelganger encounter. I was 11 years old, and I was in 6th grade when this happened. So in my school, we used to water some plants around our building every afternoon before going home. We had to get those 1-liter containers. We had to go to the garden in grade 5 building and go to the water pump. We have to individually go back and forth 3 to 5 times before having tasks done. As me and my classmates were lined up, I told my friend I'll get more containers, just so I can finish up faster. I went back to our building, and as I was picking up containers, I saw my friend come also. We were the only ones there, so I asked her if she wanted to get containers too. But she was just silent. She continued to walk up the stairs and into our classroom. I tried to follow her up, but stopped in the middle of the stairs since I remembered I have to do some watering. When I came back to the garden, I was surprised to see my friend, the same one I just saw in our building, so I said, "Hey, you got here really fast." Her face had this confused look. She replied to me that she never went out of line. I told her what happened, but she just laughed. I didn't really press the topic anymore since I don't like being pushy. To this day, I'm still wondering what could have happened to me if I followed that doppelganger into our classroom. Haunted apartment. So back when I was around 14 to 17 years old, I was living with my aunt in an apartment, and our neighbors told us that there was a murder in the apartment next to us. A drug addict killed his wife due to jealousy, and him getting killed by the wife's family. When we moved in there's a bunch of stuff happening at night, like the door getting knocked or like rattled from being forced entry or something. We actually have a gate, so every time we check the windows, there's no one there. When we learned the backstory of the apartment, I kind of got scared, and there's always like a glimpse of a white shadow of a woman passing through the tables or walls. She's a kind of ghost or spirit, though. Doesn't scare me, but does like to scare my friends when they mock her. We call her Best Friend. When my aunt got the apartment to be blessed by a priest, she may have accepted us a bit. We always do an offering for her, lighting a candle and foods, and sometimes we get blessings. And the too terrifying experience I had was when I woke up around 3 a.m. because I heard a crash around my wardrobe. I immediately got up, went to my aunt's room, and I remember my aunt waking up wearing all black, asking me what I was doing. To which I replied, "I'm scared." Then she got up, went straight to the bathroom. I kind of calmed down and didn't wait for my aunt to come back, so I went in my room, took my phone out of the charger and put it next to me. Then I slept. So when lunch came, I told her what happened, and she said I don't remember that happening. Told me she was wearing a blue shirt and pink shorts, not all black. She joked that maybe I was dreaming, but I wasn't, because if I did, then my phone should have still been charging. Still creeps me out when I remember it. And the second time is when it was raining and the power supply went out. It was an early afternoon. I was playing on my laptop. Aunt called me to her room and told me to pull out my refrigerator's plug. As I got outside of her room, the door to the dirty kitchen was open and I saw a black shadow of a man, and all I felt was terror. I actually screamed, cried, and went back inside the room yelling, there's a man, repeatedly. When my aunt checked, there was nothing in the dirty kitchen and there's no other entry other than the dining room, so it really scared the crap out of me. Either those spirits really liked to scare me because I was young and a scaredy cat, or were those like evil ones? I don't know. And ever since I learned to ignore them because my aunt told me the more they see I'm scared, the more they'll show themselves. Has anyone else experienced this? For some context, I'm an adult now, and this is one of my many stories I have that can borderline on paranormal. Given after many years, I had thought about the things I experienced and finally came to a conclusion that there was no possible explanation except for paranormal activity of some form. When I was a kid, I had a heavy imagination. Probably no thanks to my mother, who would tell me stories of fae that lived in the mushrooms and in small nooks and crannies in our trailer. For reference, we live in South Georgia. When I was about 5 years old and started having some memory, I remember playing with a little girl with dishwater blonde hair and almost had a purple coat. She had pants and a hat on. She had a smile that always made me feel safe and happy as a kid. Around the times I saw her, she appeared to be my age. It was very unsettling because I'd always see her, but I would never see her mom or anybody else when neighborhood people would show up. It was like she disappeared. There was one instance I was thinking about this morning, scrolling through this community. This instance happened right before I began school, kindergarten. She gave me a green mint. My mom was worried when I was eating the mint because she didn't know who gave it to me, and she didn't believe me that Kyler came up to the door and gave it to me. Instead, she thought a stranger did. When school started, I was excited and I saw Kyler in my class. But when the first day of school ended, she took my hand and she told me I was the best friend she ever had, and she thanked me. When I blinked, she was gone, and there were other kids asking me who I was talking to. Nobody saw or even knew of a Kyler in my kindergarten class. I can't find any stories in my hometown that may have implied she existed at all. Has anyone else experienced this? How did it make you feel? An entity followed me from my friend's house. In my mid-20s, I had a job that I had to travel 50 weeks a year for. I loved it. OTW to Noonan, Georgia once. Stopped at a friend's house for a visit because I hadn't seen them in years. This particular friend had a very alternative lifestyle, dibbled and dabbled into a lot of things. While at their house, I was very uncomfortable. I've always been in tune with my spirit, and it was kind of in an uproar in this house. Couldn't even sit down. I stood the entire time and made up an excuse as to why I had to leave earlier than planned. That night I got settled into my hotel room, began to doze with the TV on, which I rarely do. And as I'm dozing, I can tell I'm not alone. I look to the foot of my bed and I see a dark figure, tall, lanky, with long fingers that come to a point. I'm scaring the shit out of myself just recalling this. The figure begins to pace in front of the bed, dragging those long fingers across the comforter as it paces. It was teasing me. I couldn't move. Felt like sleep paralysis, but while I could talk, I couldn't move. Suddenly, it crouched down as if it were going to pounce on me. Closed my eyes as I felt something jump onto the bed. Began to pray aloud, and something told me to call out my friend's name. I did and told him that he couldn't have my soul. I just knew to say that. Continued to pray, got still, quiet. Opened my eyes and it was gone. I can't explain it, but something within me knew it came from my friend's house. I had an incident with the same friend years later that confirmed it. That's a crazy story as well. I had don't know what it was, but it never came back. Sleep paralysis, or something more serious. This has been happening to me often, but yesterday was the scariest it happened. It's called sleep paralysis. When you just fall asleep, and you suddenly feel like something's attacking you physically while you're asleep. But you cannot move, you cannot scream for help. You're aware of everything that's happening, and from my experience, the best way to get out of it is to focus on trying to move even a finger. It'll break the paralysis, and you will regain control over your body, woken up in the middle of the night in total shock of what just happened. But yesterday, it happened. The worst time it's happened to me. I literally saw 3 shadowy figures looking straight at me like they were examining me. When it was happening, I remembered that exact moment and the amount of fear I was in knowing what was happening, but I couldn't do anything about it. I did eventually wake up after a few seconds, but I was in absolute shock. I can still remember the figures till now, and I'm genuinely scared of sleeping. Not sure why this is happening, as never in my life have I previously encountered such instances. Very, very strange, nevertheless, and I can almost guarantee you those figures were real. Honestly, one of the scariest moments of my life. The rock ladies of my childhood. As of now, I'm a 17-year-old male, and I've been seeking answers for a lot of unexplainable things. But one sticks out to me in particular from the first few years of my life. I know this Reddit is superb for consulting others to find answers on these sorts of subjects. I don't remember much in my early years, which is fairly normal, but I have vivid memories of being watched and scared by who I called the rock ladies. I'll provide a detailed description, but the fact that I remember them so clearly still freaks me out. I know they weren't all in my little child noggin, because I could see and feel them. One of them was, assuming the best I can, about 6'7". The other was about 5'6". They had little to no body fat whatsoever. They were both white with flesh and bones resembling that of a flying squirrel on their arms. The flesh connecting from their arms to their chest was almost ripped and tattered. They would try to talk with me, but I never understood. By that age, I spoke sentences while on my own, so I knew that what they were speaking was not English. I can't describe what it sounded like, and nor do I wish to remember. The most prominent things, though, were the plethora of rocks lodged into their skin. They had little to no hair and eyes that bulged out, plus the smile of a chain smoker. Chain smokers have particular smiles. Anyway, but the rocks were the freakiest part. They varied in size, and the women were absolutely covered in them. Never did I see them with any clothes on either. In my childhood home, my room was a corridor across from my parents', and I can vividly recall trying to get through the corridor at night to sleep with them because the rock ladies were freaking me out. They'd scare me deliberately, and when I would sleep on my parents' floor, they would stand over me and just watch. They went away around sunrise every morning. They stopped appearing to me when I was around 4.5. Haven't seen them again, but it haunts me like crazy. I'm a total magnet for weird shit to go down. I've seen and experienced things I wish I could experience, but all I wish I've been able to let go of. Even if they were objectively far, far, far scarier than the ladies. I have no ideas nor answers. They only touched me a few times, but the feeling I could describe was feeling like where they touched, it would feel like ragged wood was being probed against me. They also had far more joints than the average person and could extend parts of their hands and necks. That's all of the information about them that I can recall. Keep in mind, I had an entirely healthy childhood up until that point and had never seen or heard anything of the sort. If there were any ideas, I would be over the moon to hear them out. This has been haunting me for over a decade, and I'm positive it'll continue until I get some answers. Who's there? When I was about 6 or so in the early 90s, I shared a room with my younger brother, who would have been 4 at this time. For a clearer picture, we had a detachable bunk bed. During this time, they were detached, and one bed was at one wall of the room and the other across it. There was a space about 5 feet in between. There was a window right by the foot of my bed that was covered by light curtains that dimmed the moonlight in, just enough to be able to see object silhouettes. One night, well into the night, while everybody had long gone to bed, I woke to hear my brother whimpering. I thought to myself, let's get up and see what's wrong with my brother. Just as my muscles were contracting as I made the move to get up, I looked ahead and I saw a figure sit up at the foot of my bed. As they were on my bed, I could see the silhouette of a man with short hair, and he whispered, "Who is this?" Laid there completely frozen in fear, breathing as silently and slowly as I could to not alert this figure of my presence. I remember being soaked in sweat and not blinking till the sun came up. For some reason, I felt ashamed to tell my parents about this. By this time, I was already obsessed with horror movies, so I thought they would blame this on the movies and prohibit me to watch them. I did eventually tell them, but my mom said I needed to pray. The next situation took place in the same room. My mom asked me as a teenager if I remember telling her about the man with no legs. She said that maybe a year before the other incident, I told her that I'd seen an old man with long white hair sitting on my bed. The man was missing his legs from the knee down. She said I told her that the man spoke to me, but I don't recall what he said. At this time, we had an uncle and his family living with us. His daughter was about 5 or 6 at the time, and they were using my old bedroom where the other incidents had taken place. My mom was a little spooked by what she told me next. She said that my aunt, my 5-year-old cousin's mom, told her that my cousin saw an old man with long hair and no legs sitting on the bed. She also mentioned that the man spoke to her, but I don't remember what they said or what the man said. It's freaked me out a bit. I hadn't spoken to my family about this for years, but I want to bring it back up to get more details. One last incident. When I was in my early teens, we still had the bunk bed. That was the one I mentioned in the first story. But this time it was put together, one on top of the other, and I slept on the top one. I went to my room and climbed up to my bed to lay down and chill one evening. I was probably laying for about 20 minutes, but I was fully alert as to it being early evening and the whole household was up in different areas of the house. During this time, I was hearing the sheets of the bottom bed move around. I was also hearing the old mattress springs squeaking. I just assumed my brother had decided to join me in my chilling activities by laying down. Eventually, my mom calls from the kitchen that dinner's ready. I jump out of the top bunk and I was going to say something to my brother, probably challenging him to a race to the kitchen, when I noticed that his is empty. I was terrified. Who the hell had been tossing and turning in his bed while I was laying on the top one? I asked him non-threateningly or suspiciously if he'd been in the room. He said no. He sat on the couch watching TV. I'll never know what that was. I'm an atheist and I don't believe in supernatural entities, but it's really eerie, some of what's happened in that room. Especially the old man with no legs, and the coincidence between my cousin and I just chalk it up to a young and hyperactive imagination. That helps me not lose sleep. But what do you think? Is it possible to see the ghost of a living person? I think I may have seen one. When I was 11 or 12, I was staying at my friend's house for the night. I was sleeping in their spare room adjacent to the stairs. As a kid, I used to sleep with the door open, so I left the door open as usual and went to the bed that night. There was light bleeding from their living and lounge from their TV, so the stairway opposite my room was dimly lit, not completely dark. and I could still make out color and detail of the wall pictures. Maybe about an hour later, after laying in bed facing the wall as I usually did, I turned around and I saw what at the time I thought was my friend's mother standing on the middle stairs. I could only see her upper torso. She was staring at me with a completely emotionless and blank expression. I could make out the clothes she was wearing, the direction her hair was angled, and everything in pretty good detail considering the lighting. She was staring at me directly in the eyes, and I was staring back mainly because I felt really uneasy, considering I was a child sleeping in bed and didn't want to take my eyes off her in case something happened. After about 10 minutes, I decided to get up and go see what she wanted. It was only about 6 feet from the door, my room, that's where she was standing. By the time I got to the top of the stairs, and she had just gone, literally like she just demanifested into thin air before my eyes. I never took my eyes off her except to blink. Confused, I went downstairs to see if she was there, and she was watching TV in the lounge with her husband. So I went back to bed. About an hour later, I woke up feeling the same uneasiness. I look out of the door and she's there again, and this event repeated itself. After this one, I fell asleep until the morning, though. Knocking on the front door. I've never experienced anything like this, and I've seen a lot over the years. This is freaking me out a bit. So on Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, around 2 a.m. or so, I heard 3 loud, heavy knocks on the front door. Dogs didn't bark, and my little one barks at everything. Shot up out of bed, looked around through the windows. Didn't see anything. Cue to last night, around 2 a.m. or so, heard 3 more heavy, loud knocks at the front door. This time, it was loud enough for my niece and her boyfriend to hear, almost like it was right next to their room. They shot up, went out of their bedroom door, and did a property check. No one was there, no one was walking down the street, nothing. This is the second time within 3 days. The next time will be Tuesday into Wednesday night, if I were keeping it within the 3-day mark. We have the door and windows lined with salt, and have protection symbols under the doormats and the doors themselves. Did I mention we've seen some shit before? We take all the precautions. I did think it might be the pipes or a rodent, but the boyfriend ruled both out as he said it was too loud to be either one. We're getting a Ring camera and other security cameras in the near future, and in the meantime, this is freaking me out and I'm getting a bad vibe off it. I mean a really nasty vibe. My instinct tells me that this is not a human doing this, a rodent or even pipes. But what do y'all think? Also, we haven't had any issues in this house at all since I moved here 4 years ago. Any advice would be great. Ghost or imaginary friend? We moved about 4 months ago into a temporary place while we built our forever home. Jealous. This is an older single-wide trailer, probably the 1980s, that had been updated inside. It's cheaper, so helps with building expenses. Anyways, my son's room is on one end of the trailer and ours is on the other. We frequently go to the bathroom throughout the night next to his room. Several times now, we've went to use the restroom and heard my son giggling and talking to himself. That's in complete darkness, by himself. Sometimes you can hear what he's saying. That tickles, you're funny, etc. Now, my significant other says he heard him around 3 or 4 a.m. most times, and I've heard him around 5 or 6. My son stays with my ex-husband half the week. We have 50-50 custody. When my son isn't here, we also heard things from his room. My significant other has heard giggles and muffled talking. Toys randomly come on. However, we always find logical reasons to dismiss it. We live next to a 24-hour gas station about 20 yards from my son's window. Figure it's people talking over there. Plus, we have 2 cats and they may sneak into his room and knock toys on. That being said, this morning my son told me that there's a boy in his room and he tickles him. Totally has me freaked. Backstory on my son. He's 5 years old and is diagnosed with autism. He was nonverbal until last year. We do struggle with complex conversations, so asking him to describe what he sees just doesn't work well yet. He's a very happy-loving child, and since moving he seems to be acting the same. Just these issues at night when he's awake, which is causing him to be sleepy during the day. So, ghost, imaginary friend, just hoping somebody has a similar situation. Our home is kind of projected to be done in September, so we'll be here for several more months. And I will be here tomorrow night. See ya.